Fortune Podcast, From Pain and Prison to Purpose, Episode 12. I am Fortune Reigns, and this is Fortune. Segment 1. The Cost of Staying the Same. Most conversations about change focus on the cost of changing. The discomfort, the uncertainty, the risk of trying something different and having it not work out. The vulnerability of committing to a new direction in front of people who remember who you used to be. Those costs are real. Nobody is going to pretend otherwise. But there is another cost that almost never gets discussed with the same honesty, and that is the cost of staying the same. Because staying the same is not neutral. It is not a pause. It is not a holding pattern that keeps your options open until you are ready. Staying the same is a choice. And like every choice, it has consequences. When you stay the same, people who depend on you stay in the same position too. Your children continue without the father who chose to show up fully. Your community continues without the contribution you are capable of making. The young men and women who are listening for a voice that sounds like theirs, that has been where they have been, continue without the guidance only your specific experience can provide. When you stay the same way, your potential does not sit patiently waiting for you to claim it. It erodes slowly, quietly, without announcement. The window does not stay open indefinitely. When you stay the same, the pain you have been through loses its purpose. It becomes just suffering. Just a story with no second act. Just weight you carried without ever converting it into something that moved you or anyone else forward. That is the real cost. And it is a cost most people never calculate because it accumulates invisibly. There is no bill that arrives, no moment where the loss becomes undeniable, just a slow narrowing of what is possible the longer you delay the decision to move. You have already made the decision to move. These episodes are evidence of that. But the decision has to be renewed, not once, continuously. Every moment when it would be easier to drift. Every afternoon when the work feels unrewarded. Every evening when the old version of yourself sends an invitation to return. You renew the decision and keep it moving. Here is your action step. Write down honestly what staying the same has already cost you. Not in blame or shame, in clarity. Name what has been lost or delayed because of seasons where you did not move. Then write what continued movement is building toward. Hold both lists. Let the contrast fuel the decision. Because the cost of change is temporary. The cost of staying the same compounds indefinitely. Move. Segment 2. Reclaiming your narrative. Someone else has been narrating your story. The judge who sentenced you, the system that labeled you, the people in your life who decided what you were capable of based on the worst version of yourself they encountered. The internal voice that internalized all of those external verdicts and began repeating them as truth. All of them have been holding the pen. It is time to take it back. Your narrative is not the charges. It is not the sentence. It is not the record. It is not the version of events that was told about you without your full voice, without your full context, without the complexity of what led to where you were and what you have built since. Your narrative is the whole story, and you are the only one qualified to tell it. Now, reclaiming your narrative does not mean rewriting history. It does not mean denying accountability or softening what happened. Accountability is part of the story. Owning your choices is part of the story. But so is everything else. The circumstances that shaped you before you ever made a single decision. The system that failed you before you failed within them. The absence of certain resources, certain models, certain guidance at critical moments in your development. The resilience you demonstrated in environments designed to break people. The growth you have committed to and the evidence of that growth you are building right now. All of that is part of your narrative, and it belongs in it. When you reclaim your narrative, something shifts in how you carry yourself. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop shrinking in rooms where your record might be known. You stop allowing the most limited interpretation of your life to be the one that defines how you move. You walk with the full story, the painful parts and the powerful parts, the failures and the lessons, the prison and the purpose. That is not arrogance. That is wholeness. Here is your action step. Write a paragraph about yourself in the third person. Not who you were at your worst, the full version. Who you have been, what you have survived, what you have learned, and who you are choosing to become. Write it as if you are introducing yourself to someone who has never heard your name. Then Read it back to yourself out loud, because the story you tell about yourself is the story you live into. Make sure it is yours. Make sure it is whole. And make sure it is moving forward. Segment 3. The discipline of boundaries and why most men avoid them. Boundaries are not a soft topic. They are one of the most practical and powerful tools available to a man who is rebuilding his life. And they are also one of the most consistently avoided, misunderstood, and poorly executed disciplines in the personal development of men who come from the kind of environments that incarceration reflects. Here is why. In many of the communities and environments where incarceration is most prevalent, boundaries were not modeled as strength. Saying no was interpreted as weakness. Protecting your energy was seen as selfishness. Walking away from situations that threatened your stability was called running. So most men in your position learned to absorb, to stay in, to manage everything without ever establishing the lines that protected what they were building. And that pattern, if not interrupted, follows you into your rebuild and dismantles it from the inside. Because you cannot build a stable life while remaining available to every person, situation, and environment that wants access to your time and energy. Boundaries are not walls. They are not about cutting people off or becoming inaccessible to walking through the world with an impenetrable exterior. Boundaries are about clarity. They define what you will and will not participate in, what you will and will not tolerate, what gets access to you and what does not. And they communicate that clarity to the people around you, not through aggression, but through consistent behavior. When you have clear boundaries, you stop leaking energy into situations that drain you. You stop being pulled into conflicts that are not yours. You stop absorbing other people's chaos as your responsibility. And you free up the time, focus, and emotional capacity to put into what you are actually building. The men who build most powerfully are not the ones who are available to everyone. They are the ones who are fully present and committed to the people and purposes they have chosen, and appropriately unavailable to everything that competes with those commitments. That selectivity is not coldness, it is discipline. Here is your action step. Identify one area in your life where you have been operating without a clear boundary. A relationship, a situation, a recurring demand of your time or energy that you have been absorbing without choosing to. Define the boundary clearly in writing. What you will and will not do going forward. Then communicate it, not with a speech, but with your behavior, starting immediately. Because a boundary that exists only in your mind is not a boundary. It is a wish. Make it real. Segment 4. Building income with what you already have. We talked about money in episode 10 from the perspective of mindset and foundation. Now we get more specific because mindset without method leaves you impaired and broke. And you need both the right thinking and the right framework to build income that sustains your life you are designing. The most common mistake men make when thinking about income after incarceration is waiting until they have the ideal setup before they begin. Waiting for the business to be fully formed, waiting for the website, waiting for the certification, waiting for the perfect moment that will signal that they are ready. That moment does not come. Ready is built through action, not through preparation. So you begin with an inventory right now, today, with no additions and no improvements. What do you have? Skills. Any ability to do something that other people need done and cannot or will not do themselves. Repair, transport, cooking, cleaning, landscaping, moving, tutoring, writing, speaking, organizing, anything. Knowledge. Any area where your experience, your background, or your self-education gives you understanding that others would pay to access. This includes the expertise we discussed in episode 11, the hard-won insight that comes from having lived what most people only theorize about. Network. Every person you know is a potential connection to an opportunity, not to exploit, but to engage. People hire and refer people they know and trust. Your network, even if it feels limited, has more reach than you realize. Story. Your experience, organized and communicated, is a marketable asset. Speaking, coaching, consulting, content, advocacy. All of these are income pathways built directly from what you have lived. You do not need all four to start. You need one. Pick the one that is most immediately accessible to you and take one income generating action from it within the next 48 hours. Not a plan, an action, a conversation, an offer, a service rendered, a piece of content published. Here is your action step. Write down your most immediate accessible skill or area of knowledge. Then identify one specific person or audience who needs it. Then make one direct move toward offering it. Because income does not begin with a business plan. It begins with a decision to offer what you already have to someone who already needs it. Start there. Build from there. Everything else follows. Segment 5. The power of consistency over intensity. Intensity gets attention. Consistency builds lives. And most men in the rebuilding process default to intensity because intensity feels like progress. The all-night planning session, the week of furious activity, the dramatic declaration of change that fills the room and generates energy, and then within days or weeks fades back into the familiar. That is not a character flaw. It is a pattern, and patterns can be interrupted. Consistency is less exciting than intensity. It does not produce the same emotional charge. It does not generate the same social response. Nobody celebrates the man who quietly shows up and does the work every single day without announcement. But that man builds something the intense man will never. He builds a life that holds. Think about what consistency actually produces over time. A man who reads for 20 minutes every day accumulates over 100 hours of focused learning in a year. A man who makes one income generating move every day creates 365 opportunities in a year. A man who invests 15 minutes in his inner life every day gives himself over 90 hours of grounded, centered clarity in a year. None of those actions feel significant in the moment, but compounded across time, they are transformative. The challenge is that consistency requires you to act without immediate reward, to trust the process before the process has produced visible results, to believe in the direction before the direction has delivered the destination. That requires a specific kind of faith, not the absence of doubt, but the decision to move in spite of it. And it requires a structure that does not depend on motivation, because motivation is intermittent. Structure is reliable. When the structure is in place, consistency becomes the default rather than the exception. Now hear this. If you are ready to build the structure with direct support, visit SolomanGraves.com. That's SolomanGraves.com. SolomanGraves.com. Visit SolomanGraves.com to book a one-on-one session. We will design your framework for consistent movement, income development, and purposeful living together. Here is your action step. Choose one action that moves your life forward and commit to doing it every single day for the next 30 days. Not when you feel like it. Every day. Write it down. Set a daily reminder. Track your completion. At the end of 30 days, look at what that one consistent action has produced. Because 30 days of daily action on one thing will show you more about the power of consistency than any motivational content ever could. Commit to it. Segment 6. You are further along than you think. There is a distortion that happens in the rebuilding process that almost no one talks about because you are so focused on where you are going. Because the vision of where you want to be is so clear, and the distance between here and there can feel so large, it becomes almost impossible to accurately see how far you have already traveled. You compare your current position to the destination, and the gap looks enormous. But if you turn around and compare your current position to where you started, the distance you have already covered is significant. The man who is listening to this episode is not the same man who would have dismissed it. The man who is executing action steps is not the same man who would have absorbed content without moving. The man who is rebuilding trust, designing his next chapter, protecting his peace, and developing his discipline is not the same man who walked into a system that told him this was as far as he would ever go. You are further along than you think. And that is not a motivational statement. It is an accurate assessment. Progress in the rebuilding process is often invisible in the short term because the most important changes happen internally before they manifest externally. The shift in how you think about yourself, the expansion of what you believe is possible, the quiet accumulation of kept promises and executed action steps and renewed decisions. Those changes are real even when they are not yet visible in your circumstances. And the external evidence is coming. It always follows the internal work when the internal work is sustained. So here is what I want you to carry out of episode 12. Stop measuring your progress only by the distance remaining. Start measuring it also by the distance covered. Both measurements are true. Both are necessary. The distance remaining keeps you moving. The distance covered keeps you grounded in the reality that what you are doing is working. You started this series with a decision. You have sustained it across episode after episode of real work, real application, and real accountability. That is not ordinary. Most people never get here. Most people stay comfortable in the familiar, in the predictable, in the painful, but known rather than risk the unfamiliar, the uncertain, the possible. You chose differently. Keep choosing differently. Here is your closing action step for episode 12. Write down one thing you have built, changed, or proven about yourself since you began this series. One thing that is real and true and evidence of your movement. Hold it. Return to it on the hard days. Because on the days when the distance remaining looks impossible, the distance covered is the reminder that you already know how to move. You have done it before. You are doing it now. You will keep doing it. From pain and prison to purpose. I am Fortune Reigns, and this has been Fortune.